Have you ever wondered what event sparked the bloodiest war in American history? Well, it all began with a long-standing tension that divided the country, a tension rooted in the struggle over slavery and states' rights. The North, with its burgeoning industries, was moving towards a free labor system. The South, on the other hand, was heavily reliant on a plantation economy, which was deeply entwined with the institution of slavery. This fundamental difference in economic systems and societal views created an irreparable rift. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was the match that ignited this powder keg. Lincoln, a Republican, was a known opponent of the expansion of slavery. His election was seen by many in the South as a direct threat to their way of life and their rights as states. This was the catalyst that led to the secession of Southern states and the beginning of the Civil War. The stage was set for a conflict that would define a nation. With the first shots fired at Fort Sumter in April 1861, the American Civil War began. A war that would divide a nation, pit brother against brother, and forever alter the course of history. In the early stages, both sides were green, untested, and uncertain of what lay ahead. The first major battle of the war, the Battle of Bull Run, was a sobering wake-up call. It was here that the Union, under the command of Brigadier General Irvin McDowell, faced off against the Confederate forces led by Generals Joseph E. Johnston and P.G.T. Beauregard. The Union, anticipating a swift victory, was caught off guard by the fierce resistance of the Confederates, resulting in a hasty retreat and a clear Confederate victory. This battle shattered any illusion of a quick and easy war. The Union, recognizing the magnitude of the task at hand, began to formulate a strategy known as the Anaconda Plan. Devised by General Winfield Scott, this strategy aimed to squeeze the life out of the Confederacy, just like an anaconda, by blockading southern ports and controlling the Mississippi River. The Confederacy, on the other hand, planned to leverage its geographical advantage and the determination of its troops to wear down the Union forces, hoping for recognition and support from European powers. Key players began to emerge on both sides. For the Union, President Abraham Lincoln provided steady, if sometimes unpopular, leadership. On the battlefield, Ulysses S. Grant and William Tecumseh Sherman would become renowned for their strategic prowess. For the Confederacy, President Jefferson Davis and his chief military advisor, General Robert E. Lee, played pivotal roles, with Lee's tactical brilliance shining in many battles. As the war raged on, it became clear that this was not just a battle of armies, but also a battle of ideologies, economies, and ways of life. It was a fight for the soul of a nation, a test of the American experiment. The war was far from over, and the battles ahead would test the convictions of both sides. As the war dragged on, key battles and strategies began to turn the tide. In the early years of the American Civil War, the Confederacy had seen a string of victories. However, the tide began to change with two significant battles, Antietam and Gettysburg, and a powerful piece of legislation, the Emancipation Proclamation. First, let's turn to the Battle of Antietam. Fought on September 17, 1862, it was the bloodiest single-day battle in American history with over 22,000 casualties. Though technically a draw, Antietam was a strategic victory for the Union. It halted the Confederate invasion of the North and provided President Abraham Lincoln with the opportunity he needed to announce the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation was a game-changer. Issued on September 22, 1862, and effective from January 1, 1863, it declared that all enslaved people in Confederate-held territory were to be set free. This didn't immediately end slavery, but it fundamentally shifted the focus of the war. The Union was no longer just fighting to preserve the nation. It was now a battle for human freedom. This moral cause gave the Union a significant boost in motivation and international support. Then came the Battle of Gettysburg. Over 3 days in July 1863, the Union Army, under the command of General George Meade, clashed with Robert E. Lee's Confederate forces. It was the war's deadliest battle and a decisive victory for the Union. This triumph stopped another Confederate invasion of the North and marked a turning point in the Civil War. The Confederacy would never again possess the strength to mount such an offensive. These events, Antietam, the Emancipation Proclamation, and Gettysburg, shifted the momentum in favor of the Union. The Confederacy began to lose ground, both literally and figuratively. The tide had turned. The Confederacy was on the back foot, but the war was not yet won. The struggle would continue with further battles and bloodshed, but from this point on, the Union held the upper hand. The final years of the war saw desperate attempts by the Confederacy to turn the tide. As the Union forces tightened their grip, the Confederacy's hopes rested on a few crucial battles and strategic maneuvers. One such was the Siege of Petersburg, a 9-month-long battle that was less a battle and more a prolonged period of trench warfare. It was a desperate attempt to hold on to the city that was the Confederacy's last major supply base. The siege was a grueling affair, with both sides dug in for the long haul. The Union, under the command of Ulysses S. Grant, sought to cut off the Confederate Army from its necessary supplies, while the Confederates, led by Robert E. Lee, fought tooth and nail to hold their ground. Despite their tenacity, the Confederate forces were gradually weakened by the lack of supplies and the continuous pressure from the Union Army. In the final days of the siege, the Confederacy made a last-ditch effort to break the Union lines, but to no avail. The Union forces held strong, and on April 2, 1865, the Confederate forces finally withdrew from Petersburg. This marked the beginning of the end for the Confederacy. In the wake of the fall of Petersburg, Lee's forces attempted to regroup and retreat, but the Union Army was on their heels, and on April 9, 1865, Lee's forces found themselves surrounded at Appomattox Courthouse. With no other option, Lee surrendered to Grant, effectively ending the Civil War. The surrender at Appomattox Courthouse was a pivotal moment in American history. It marked the end of a bloody and divisive war, a war that had torn the country apart. It was a moment of relief, but also a moment of profound sadness. The war had cost countless lives and left deep wounds on the nation's psyche. The war was over, but the scars remained. The American Civil War had ended, but its impact was far from over. The years following the war, known as the Reconstruction period, were marked by attempts to rebuild and restore the war-ravaged South. During this time, the federal government aimed to reintegrate the southern states back into the Union, but not without significant resistance and countless challenges. A pivotal event during this period was the tragic assassination of President Abraham Lincoln, just days after the Southern surrender. Lincoln had envisioned a lenient Reconstruction policy, hoping to heal the nation's wounds quickly. His untimely death, however, led to a power shift in Washington, with new leaders implementing harsher policies on the South. The long-term effects of the Civil War are profound and far-reaching. Among the most significant outcomes was the end of slavery. The 13th Amendment, ratified in December of 1865, abolished slavery throughout the United States, forever altering the nation's social and economic landscape. Yet despite the end of slavery, the war left a lasting division between the North and South. The South, devastated by the war and resentful of the North's Reconstruction policies, struggled to recover economically and socially. The North, on the other hand, experienced rapid industrial growth and economic prosperity. This disparity further deepened the divide between the two regions, a divide that, to some extent, still lingers today. Moreover, the Civil War set the stage for the civil rights movement nearly a century later, as African Americans continued to fight for equality and justice. The war not only transformed America's political and social realms, but also left an indelible mark on the nation's collective memory, shaping our understanding of freedom, equality, and nationhood. The American Civil War, a defining period in our history, continues to shape our nation today. Its legacy reminds us of our past struggles and triumphs, and the enduring quest for a more perfect union. The American Civil War was a turning point in American history. It was a conflict sparked by deep-rooted issues of inequality and state rights. The war's commencement was marked by the Battle of Fort Sumter, a pivotal moment that ignited the flames of combat across the nation. As the war raged on, significant turning points emerged, such as the Battle of Gettysburg and the Emancipation Proclamation, altering the trajectory of the conflict and the nation's future. The war concluded with General Lee's surrender at Appomattox, marking an end to the bloodiest conflict on American soil. However, the war's impact extended beyond the battlefield. It transformed the social, political, and economic landscape of the United States, leaving a legacy that continues to shape the country today. The aftermath of the war saw the abolition of slavery and the struggle for equal rights, a battle that continues to this day. As we remember this period, we are reminded of the cost of division and the importance of unity.